The winning streak is over, or is it just starting for the Auburn Tigers? The Auburn Tigers finally drop a game, but what does this mean long term? Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Four. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for giving us a listen today. We're talking basketball, and joining me is my good friend Jacob Goins, host of On the Line Sports Talk on 106.7. Jacob, the Auburn Tigers finally they lost. They lost another conference game, and it was a road game, as to be expected. This is their first conference road loss of the season. They had not lost a game on the road in conference all season. Before we started recording, we talked about statistically, it looked rough at first, but at the end of the day, Auburn shot 50% from the field and lost.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it in the past where this season, Mike, Auburn has shot better on the road than they have at home. And you continued that again on the road at Texas A&M. But, man, when you give up that many offensive rebounds where they had 37 misses and they grabbed 24 of them, there's just not a whole lot you can do. And they score most of the time they grab that offensive rebound on second chance opportunities. Auburn couldn't grab a rebound. Auburn couldn't get a foul. Auburn couldn't get a stop. And, yeah, I mean, you go on the road and score mid-70s and shoot 50% and you still can't win, that means you couldn't get stops defensively. And that's exactly what happened. And you missed Denver Jones. There's no doubt about it. I'm sure we're going to get to that. But you missed him. But you said something to me off mic. That should not have been the full difference. But maybe it was. And Auburn loses a game that I think a lot of people had circled on the schedule. I think one that people were worried about. And myself going into this game, it almost felt inevitable for something like this to happen eventually. And it happens in a game that, look, it stings to lose, sure. But in the grand scheme of things, you have a chance to make up for it Saturday with a win against Alabama, and you're still SEC regular season champs.
I agree. Look, obviously some juice came off this one with Auburn clinching the outright title a few days ago. And, we all knew what was at stake in this one. Really, nothing for Auburn. A loss here is not going to change the national perception of them being the best team in the country. They are likely to go into next week as the number one overall team in the country again. And statistically, when you look at this one, they still don't have a loss worse than anybody who they're competing with on their schedule. Your losses are Duke, Florida, and Texas A&M. Two of those on the road, and one against the current the number 6 team at the time. So I just this one I want to go back to the statistics. Auburn's strength has been their depth all season long. Without Denver Jones and rough day from what I call rough day for Janai Broome, depth didn't really show up. Chaney Johnson was unable to get shots off. He was only 2 of 3 in this game, and you only got 10 points from your bench, Jacob. What an odd stat for Auburn this year. Only 10 points from your bench, and you gave up 36 bench points, and you lost by 9. I mean, there are so many things I could point to that are statistical anomalies. One thing I heard the commentators say near the end of the game is, this is a one-off.
Yeah.
Auburn is still the best team in the country, and I think that's never been true. I think this is a one-off. There were too many things that just didn't make sense in this one to me.
Yeah, I mean, when they were talking about that, Jimmy Dykes was on ESPN with like 6 minutes to go. They were like, this is not Auburn basketball. This is not the Auburn team we've seen all season long. And you mentioned the bench points, and I think a big factor in that is the fact that Jahad Pettiford had to start, right? He had to start at the point guard spot, and his 15, 20 points of production that he brings every night is usually coming off the bench. But you've got to have somebody else there, whether it's Chaney Johnson. We saw Ja'Kai Howard get in the action in this game against Texas A&M. And what about Chris Moore? I mean, had one made field goal, but just had the one made field goal. Like, you've got to have somebody else step up when somebody else can't go. Of course, that was Denver Jones. And look, I think Jahad Pettiford played a good game. I think in terms of him orchestrating the offense, it got stuck a lot in his hands. but he made
Yeah.
some big shots to make up for it. But yeah, Janai Broome with another, as we would call it, mediocre performance by his standards. 8.7 boards, 2 assists, had a couple of turnovers as well. And
Yeah.
people are starting to talk about whether he lost the National Player of the Year. If he did, so be it. Auburn's got bigger aspirations, and you got to find a way to get over this loss and move on for Alabama this weekend, because you did not play your best game at all against Texas A&M.
They do have bigger aspirations. I think that can't be understated. Going back to the stat sheet here, Miles Kelly had a rough night, 1 for 8 from the field. Now, he did go 10 of 10 from the free throw line, so he got into double figures by the graces of those free throws, Jacob. But certainly, if he plays his normal game, you're right in it at the end. Again, statistical anomalies here. Without Denver Jones, you needed that one more person to pick it up. Because it was not just Denver Jones scoring. It was Denver Jones's defensive torture chamber that limits what A&M probably could have done offensively from that guard spot, and maybe kept you a little closer here at the end. I don't know that Auburn wins this game if Denver Jones plays. And I want to be clear about that. I'm not saying, oh, they didn't have Denver, so they lost. I think there was plenty to critique here if you're Auburn. But I don't think that this loss deserves an overreaction. I don't want to say that it's meaningless as well. It's not meaningless. When you lose games, I think it's important to go in on a hot streak. I think it's important to have momentum going into the SEC tournament.
Sure.
But like you said, the goals, the aspirations, the goals, they're bigger. They're bigger than the SEC tournament. They're bigger than the regular season crown. And they're bigger than a single player winning National Player of the Year.
And they should be. The aspirations should be bigger than that, because this team is good enough to do that. And they want those things, right? Bruce Pearl has talked to us in midweek media availabilities and post-game conferences where he says, look, we want those things, and they're on the ladder of things we're trying to achieve, which it was beating your rivals and winning the SEC regular season title and trying to get to make a run in Nashville and win some of these awards. But at the end of the day, yeah, you're trying to win a national championship. And give credit to A&M, because they desperately needed this game. They were on a 4-game losing streak. It was senior night where they honored 8 seniors on their home floor in their final home game of the year. And it was the number 1 team in the country that came in, and you beat the number 1 team for the first time in your program's history. For Texas A&M, it's a big deal. They just had a lot more to play for than Auburn. And I hate that it came down to that. That's not the Bruce Pearl way. That's not the Auburn way. But that's just what happened. And so you've got to take all of that and, again, move on from it. And you have a chance to bounce back and rebound with a win over Alabama on your home floor, where you honor a bunch of seniors this Saturday. But you mentioned the free throws with Miles Kelly, who goes 10 for 10. Mike, I think it's physically impossible for the fact that he had 10 free throws and everybody else on Auburn's team had 5 combined.
Wow. Yeah.
In 40 minutes of play? Come on, give me a break. It's impossible for that to be the fact. With Janai Broome having 1, Chad Baker having 2, and Tahad having 2. You're telling me that nobody else got fouled in this game? Okay.
I hate to Auburn had a lot to critique in this one, so I hate to lean on officiating. I do think we can point that out while saying, hey, Auburn should have won this regardless of how that one was officiated, or at least been a little closer, not a double-digit loss certainly at the end. Look, at the end of the day, Auburn didn't look good, Jacob, but you can by visiting our friends at the Vibe Vault. Look, if you're in the Phoenix City area, or if you're in the Auburn area, you don't mind a little drive, head on down to 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite I in Phoenix City, Alabama. That's on 431, right across from Chattahoochee Valley Community College. There's a Renfro's over there, Jacob. This is a great place to get a haircut. Our guy Steve Watkins over there is serving the community. Look, he keeps me fresh every week. I gotta go. I got YouTube, I've got TV appearances, and when I want to look good, I go to the Vibe Vault. You should too. Again, visit them at 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite I in Phoenix City, Alabama. When you walk through the door, make sure you let them know that the War Report sent you. And if you want to look good in another way, it's springtime. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR and use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights, and code TWR for $65 off Fire Pits and Kamado Grills. Work out, grill out, chill out. Golden's Cast Iron has a product that has you covered this spring. We appreciate them for sponsoring this segment, longtime sponsors of the War Report. And last but certainly not least, the Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORTER to get 15% off your Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, the Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. Our guy Richard at the Rogue Shop is a longtime sponsor as well, and he is serving the community in a different way, helping you relax out there this spring. The tournament is going to be stressful. The Rogue Shop has you covered. Let's jump back in here. At the end of the game, Buzz Williams did something that I thought was a class move. He held his crowd off the floor. And he showed a lot of concern for Bruce Pearl being able to get his guys off the floor safely in case the students were going to rush. Now, they ended up not rushing. I mean, he was at midcourt with his hands up saying, stop, no, please don't do that. Also, I know those fines are getting pretty steep and they probably are tired of paying them. But I thought it was a really, really class move by Buzz Williams last night to have concern for the safety of the Auburn players. Like I know, a lot of bad things can happen when thousands of people rush a basketball court in a confined space, jumping over benches. It can become chaotic quickly. And those are emotional moments for players. And having people run into you at full speed after you just lost a game can create some bad situations for players and fans.
Yeah, I think it was a mutual, I guess a two-way feeling, right, for Buzz Williams, and you hit both of them. They're perfect, Mike, about the safety of Bruce Pearl, his coaching staff, and his players, but also not wanting to take that fine. And the broadcasters were joking about save the money for NIL, save it for NIL. And it could be true, I guess. And so I think it was a two-way street. But yes, you've seen that start to become a little bit more popular. Missouri did it with Dennis Gates. He said he hopped on the microphone there that the officials used to make announcements. It was like, don't rush the floor, don't step on the floor, wait until they're done. And we've seen several coaches do that now. And so I respect Buzz Williams for doing that. And look, in another note, Buzz Williams got Auburn again. Got Bruce Pearl again. He's now, 6-2? Is that right now, the record that Buzz Williams and his time at Texas A&M versus Auburn? And look, they were a matchup nightmare in this game. Their defense was a nightmare in this game. And just their effort was a nightmare in this game. And if Auburn runs up against a team like that, or, hey, you could run into them in the NCAA tournament, Auburn has to find a way to get around that and overcome that. And they couldn't do that in this game against Texas A&M. And so shout out Buzz Williams, man. I don't know what it is, but he gets up to play Auburn, and so do his teams.
Yeah, he does. It's actually remarkable, Jacob, how much his teams get up to play Auburn. It wasn't. Sometimes I get annoyed with the commentators when it sounds like this is a bad matchup, but they weren't wrong last night. And I think that's one thing that can't be underscored. They were right last night about what kind of matchup this was for Auburn, and how difficult it was always going to be for them. Plus the circumstances, right? This was not. There wasn't a ton to play for Auburn last night in terms of goals left in the regular season. Now, I think a loss to Bama might change the math a little bit on that number one overall seed, but I don't know that it changes it that much still. Again, who's got a better body of work than the Auburn Tigers? It would feel criminal to snatch that from them right at the end because they lost to a couple of, top 25 teams at the end of their season after they've mopped up the whole conference all year. Going back here, I want to close the show talking about what I would call is a concerning trend for Auburn. Auburn loses the rebound battle last night, 41-25, Jacob. And that's significant. Before we started recording, we talked about those second chance points that Texas A&M got. 29 second chance points. They got, what was it? 14, 15 more offensive boards than Auburn. Certainly I think of all the stats that we've talked about, that's the difference in your game right there. You keep them off the offensive boards, you win this game.
Yeah, and look at this too. I mean, against Kentucky, you got dominated on the boards there too. They beat you by 15, right? They
Yeah.
beat you by 15 on the boards. And if you don't have a hot shooting night in Rupp Arena, or a hot shooting day, I guess, you probably don't win that game because of the rebounding that Kentucky had. It just came back to bite you because you didn't have the shooting night at Texas A&M. And so while those are two of the more physical rebounding teams that are in the SEC, along the way in the NCAA tournament, you got to win 6 games in a row to win a national title. You're going to run into somebody like that who is physical, who is going to body you, and who is going to throw every single person they can at the offensive board. And even if they're not a team like that, Mike, the narrative and the formula is now out against this Auburn team. They haven't lost much, but Florida was physical and dominated the boards, and Texas A&M was physical and dominated the boards. That's how you get a chance to beat the best team in college basketball, the Auburn Tigers. And so you have to find a way. Again, I keep using the word overcome. How can you overcome that? If you're fully healthy with Denver Jones, I think you have a chance. But and I think you probably will be. And I do think it was the right move to hold him out in this game against A&M for one that, again, you didn't have a ton to play for. But you can't get out rebounded by 15 or 20 in the NCAA tournament, especially a couple of times in a row, and expect to stay alive in March.
I agree with you 100%. Look, holding Denver out was the right decision. You can't risk his health at this point. Bone bruises can be tricky injuries as well, too. Like, you know, if you've ever had a bone bruise, like I had one on my shin one time, and I couldn't put pressure on it for like a week. So these are highly trained athletes. I can only imagine, you know, if they're struggling, you know, imagine what how the average person would deal with a bone bruise. But he's got a good medical staff, you know, at his disposal. And, you know, it's just about rest and recovery when it comes to bone bruises. So but you can aggravate that thing and set it back. And that's what we've seen over the years with that particular injury. No reason to risk it before the NCAA tournament in my book. I don't care what happens in the SEC tournament. The committee has told us they don't care what happens in the SEC tournament. You are what your regular season says you are. Rest Denver Jones, get him ready for the long haul. I think last night proved that if you're Auburn, you're going to need him. So, you know, that's just one man's opinion. Love having my friend Jacob Goins' opinion every single week here on the War Report. Jacob, before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, every single day, Monday through Friday, 2 to 4 on ESPN 106.7. If you're in the Auburn-Opelika area, you can tune in on ESPNAU.com as well. We have a lot of fun talking all things Auburn athletics. We're getting you ready this week for Auburn and Alabama coming up this weekend.
That's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. Guys, if you want more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. Signing off, and as always, worry.